And the idea is that I'm gonna try to bring in some red orange in my flower. My flower already looks pretty different than the one in the picture, but that's okay. That's what we do as artists, is try to show our own style. But it's really a great tutorial or a great lesson to be able to look at somebody else's work and try to recreate it with your own style. So if I want my colors to look deeper, when I am using watercolor paints and I want it to be less translucent, when I rinse my brush, I'm going to squeeze out a lot of the water, and then I'm going to dip my brush into my palette, into my colors, into my paints, and then I'm gonna apply that to the surface, my paper, and that is gonna give you a deeper hue. Remember with the blue flower how we were creating a little bit more depth by the center of the flower, making that area a little bit darker. That creates a sense of depth, which is more realistic for flowers, so that you are showing that the flower is not flat. You are showing that that flower is curved, or the petals are curved, and that there is a deeper vessel as opposed to just a flat flower or petals. So one color that I also see in this flower is brown. So instead of just using a black to create that sense of depth, I'm going to be mixing my orange with that brown. And in those areas towards where the seed pod is, I'm just going to apply a little bit of brown. So I'm going to first mix that up in my palette. And I'm just going to add that brown to the areas where it would have gotten deeper. If I was looking at the actual flower, the areas where that sense of depth would be needed. If you're seeing a lot of lines or brush strokes in your painting, why don't you wet your paintbrush and kind of tap, tap, tap over those areas? Because I was seeing a lot of lines in mine. So I'm just gonna kind of blend it a little bit more. And all I had to do was just add a little water to my paintbrush. And that's gonna help get rid of those brush strokes. When you are doing watercolor painting, it's really not typical to see brush strokes. Maybe you might see details such as those dots in a seed pod, but for you to see brush strokes when you're painting a solid color, that's something you want to try to avoid. So now I'm just applying a little bit of red to my petals here. And I may have to add a little bit of yellow as well in the areas where I want to show highlights. Remember, with all things in nature, especially bright flowers like this, you are definitely going to see shadows and you're definitely going to see highlights. So some areas where you have highlights, you could always let that be an area where you don't have a lot of paint, where you let the white paper show through. I'm gonna also add a little tinge of yellow around the tips, just to also give it a little more interesting details. And then before I go in with some more brown paint, I am gonna give it a minute to dry.